he's better than me on that same amount of effort and whatever. Like there's so many points that they could be competitive on if you have that stuff with the
Yes.
data.
I try and limit that. Like each guy has their own, heart rate zones, which, when they get the program, at the beginning of the week, it shows all their individual heart rates. And as long as they're sticking to that, which that's loaded each day, and I get to see that, but I don't really swap out each one's heart rates. I think that's very personal, and they understand too. I mean, just if you look at, a young guy compared to a guy that's more of a veteran, their heart rates are different naturally.
Yeah, and that's the natural physiology changes, isn't it? So
exactly. So I don't put that out there. I mean, there's only a few times where we've done like group spins, and then it comes up on the screen, and it's more just for me to make sure that each one's kind of in their zone, because that's an area where they can kind of almost slacken off a little, but on the motorcycle, I don't have any problems with that, and I obviously I get to see that, and I keep that pretty much between me and each individual.
Yeah, definitely. And on that, just a little side note here for you on the Polar, because I know you guys use Polar for all your heart rate tracking. I was
Correct.
actually talking to a guy from Polar Australia yesterday. They're going to start doing some support of the podcast here, and he actually
Awesome.
it was actually quite amazing. He actually knew who you were and that you had come up in multiple of their business meetings about the data that you were gaining from the use of the product, and he actually was like, "Oh, make sure you say hi to him. It's pretty impressive what he does with our products." And I was like, "Wow, it's sort of awesome that our sport in the training sense is crossing over through this, through this training for them in their marketing and stuff about how to use it." So that was pretty impressive.
No, it is. And look, Polar's been there from the beginning, with me. So, and man, I have so much data from earlier, and what's so impressive is their systems have just kept on improving, on giving you more and more of it. I remember when I'd have to break down the heart rates and then minus all the unusable time, and it would take me forever to get through.
Yeah.
Actually, thank God in those days I was only doing like one guy or maybe two. But when you got full on sun, and now it automatically does that. So gosh, it just makes my life a lot easier. And then Polar have been kind enough to let me utilize their sort of like their team docking station system.
Yep.
Which that's so cool, because in our sport, unfortunately, the heart rate monitors take a massive abuse on a motorcycle.
They do.
So
yeah.
If you don't have to have that on your wrist, and it's all in the actual transmitter, which I get to utilize, it's huge, man. That makes a big difference, and then it's quickly downloaded, and we are good to go. So no, thanks to them, they make my life a lot easier, that's for sure.
Yeah, and they definitely obviously get so much data that you're using every day. So yeah, it's an amazing product there.
Yeah.
But I was just thought it was amazing that they knew exactly who you were, because it's not too often that you can bring up somebody in the moto world to a non-moto person and they go, "Oh yeah." It was pretty awesome. So that was cool.
No, that's cool that we're making inroads into the bigger picture too, which, as I say, it's an important tool for our sport for sure.
Definitely. Now, what about the negative side of our sport is the injuries, right? What are you doing at this point in this year to either test or to confirm sort of a baseline of where the person's at, like the rider's at, to then say, all right, they did get injured, say in round 6, whatever, and we know that by 4 weeks later they're actually back to a level that is suitable from what you tested earlier to then send them back.
Yeah, David, and that's injuries are always that ugly side of the deal that you struggle with. I mean, look, we always hope and pray that the guys can get through without any injuries, but there are tip overs, and it's going to happen, and some are worse than others. But I think the three things that I analyze, the most important injury is obviously like a concussion or something, or they bang their head. That's the one that look, they do their preseason baseline testing for that,
Mm-hmm.
and then that part, if they ever do have a crash or they bang their head or they're not quite right, they automatically have to go and do that retest, and they are then under a doctor or
Yeah.
professional
Yep.
person's care in that area. And actually, yeah, in Florida we have some really good doctors that can check them and do a scan and all the rest. So that's the
Nice.
one
Yep.
that you dread the most, and you don't mess. I wouldn't say you mess around with any injury, but that one you really,
Yeah. Yeah.
that you don't take any gamble with. And then the others, I mean, the main things that I try and especially when I look at strength training, because I look at strength training as probably the best preventative. The strength training, and then also yoga. I'm a big believer in yoga, and I feel like the stretching that I have them do each morning naturally helps flexibility, and it really helps if they do tip over with the
Mm-hmm.
way their body reacts. So
Agreed.
I'm a
Yep.
big believer in that. And then I also I try and I do feel like knee injury and shoulder injury is probably one of the other main twos,
Yep. They are from
and
my data. Yep.
so yeah, so I try and focus on everything that helps with knee stability and strength, and also shoulder, stability and strength. Those are the areas that, like, I'll always highlight in my strength training to make sure that each guy, okay, are we doing everything we can to be in a better way to be preventative of in injury, and
Mm-hmm.
then from there, you carry on without trying to make it too complicated. Obviously, when I start with the guy, part of the baseline and everything is to itemize and go over any injuries that he's had, and kind of where he's at going forward, and what's our plan to hopefully make that better.
Definitely. And so then with Christian being a new starter to your program, and this is sort of a question I wanted to sort of see about with the injuries and that based on like a comparison to like the stick and ball sports where they would do exit medicals from teams and prior to contracts being put in place, and then to confirm that they can actually go ahead and do what they said they were doing. They're not coming into the new team as such, with a pre-existing thing that's going to then impact that the contract being fulfilled, let's say. Did you, with Christian coming over, did you get a chance to do anything like that, like a pre-medical or something? Or did you just basically, he signs with the team because he signs with the team, and then day one you get to work out where he's at?
Yeah, the thing is, once the team signs, the rider, I'm left with, okay, hey, we've signed him. He has his number. Start connecting and get on it. So it's
Work it
not
out,
like
please.
you've
Yeah.
got much. Yeah, so those things just come along, and honestly, you work from there forward. It's unless there was something ridiculously major, or he rolled up towards you and he's already sort of got an injury, meaning, like, oh man, I've just had ACL and
Yep.
whatever, or something. Then you're like, okay, heck, how long ago? Then you dig a little deeper. But most times I've had a new guy, that's not the case, but you do go over their sort of pre-injury sort of career in a way.
Yep.
I'd say the one that comes to mind that was the worst was when Villapoto contacted me and he wanted to join in, and the concern, he had a horrible foot injury, ankle injury, and
That's right. He had
he
that
was
big one in St.
torn.
Louis at that
Yeah,
point. Yeah, before he came to you.
exactly. And the problem with that, we were both not sure if that was something that he could actually ride a motorcycle properly with. So I had to take him to a special clinic that did a full test on that ankle mobility, and had a few doctors look at that to give their best opinion on, hey, you know what, he's still going to be able to manage a motorcycle well. It's not going to be something that has ruined basically his career, because he was torn if he should take insurance money that he'd been paying for a long time and just that's it, or what, am I able to do the job properly? But that was probably the one that we went backwards and forwards the most. And I mean, thank God that all actually worked out really well.
I was going to say, it turned out awesome considering
Yeah,
if you what you're saying there is he was thinking about taking an insurance retirement payout. That it worked out in his favor
yeah,
not to.
no, Exactly. No, it was close. It wasn't just a straight like, all right, heck, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
It was a little bit up and down. But that's, those scenarios are the ones that you try and analyze. And the biggest thing is just to make sure you have an understanding that, look, can this guy actually do his job properly?
Yeah, of
and not
course.
only for himself, but also for the team.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
yeah. So it's awesome. I picked up there that you're using some, especially with that Villapoto example, you went and used some extra medical, sources to go and get a more professional opinion on it, because it's probably not something that you can, say you're qualified to look at accurately at that level for that, especially in Villo's example, like that was a pretty significant injury. So yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. So those one-offs, the ones that you hope you never have to deal with, but every now and again in the sport, that's what pops up.
Definitely. Yeah, no, look, it's interesting. It's always part of our sport, unfortunately, but yeah, like obviously it changes what you're doing at the beginning a little bit. And like, so yeah, the stick and ball example is you don't get that sort of history coming in. You just got to take it once you've got them signed. So yeah, it's, we do it differently in the motor world.
That is for sure. Yep.
Now, I've got a couple of extra ones. Are we still all good with time? Where are we up to for yourself? How much?
Yeah.
Yeah? Awesome.
No problem.
Let's keep going then. So I've got a couple, just ones here that I put at the bottom of our question sheet that we organised beforehand. Now, how do you manage that sort of time when you lose time on things? Like, I'm thinking like along the lines of the guys, you've got 5 guys out on a cycle ride, but, flat tyres happen on cycle rides probably more often than you'd like. How do you go about, like, especially in this preseason time, there's like maybe half that ride, wasted, lost, because you've got to then get back, cut a shortcut to get back to make it to the next part of your day. How do you make up that stuff, or can you? All right, so let's so another technical difficulty, but we're just jumping straight back in. So one of those questions about, how you make up some time in this preseason when if you've got 5 guys on a cycle ride, and then, flat tires happen on these rides, unfortunately, probably more often than you'd like. How do you make up that? Because you're going to, at that point, you're there repairing a tire. Potentially it takes longer than you'd like. You have to cut that ride short to get back to make it to the next part of your training day. Can you make that up, or what are you trying to do to sort of alleviate those little issues of time loss?
Things you can't even be prepared for, and that does happen. You're right. So in that situation, it is a bit of a bummer because almost everybody suffers through that. I don't like to just say, hey, you guys carry on, and because you never know when, I do believe we still maintain as a team and we do stuff together, but to a limit. If it's just a quick bike tire change or something, then, I have the stuff ready, and pretty much I'm the guy that'll sort it out.
You're carrying the toolkit?
Yeah, well, I have a toolkit on every guy's bike. Actually, each guy's bike is housed at my place.
Okay.
They all come to my house, cycle from here, because then I can keep a bit better maintenance schedule and also monitor. Like if a guy's tires are looking tired, these athletes, it's not something they really monitor, but I will check on that and make sure that we're at least ahead of the game. So that helps.
Yep.
But still, there are those occasions. In fact, the other day it was me that I caught something and the tire blew. Was it? So, but I will at the end of the week, because when I look at training time, I have a plan for the week, and whatever I'm lacking there, that it will be tacked on to the following week in some way or so. It's not that hard to balance that out. I mean, sometimes the less they know, the better. Like they don't know what I have, and then suddenly it'll be slightly longer ride, and every now and I get the one saying, man, that was longer than normal. Is there
twigged a little bit about that one?
I'll say, yeah, I'm making up for some stuff that I know that's coming. That's not, and then there's no questions. But you do have to adjust accordingly. And some days too, and I only really know it at the end of the week when I've balanced everything out. And that's the only kind of possible way of doing it. I used to do it day by day, but it's very difficult to then like rearrange and just and change, especially when you have 5.
Yeah.
So I just do it more at the end of the week, and that might adjust things the following week with an extra 15 20 minutes in cardio, or the guys will notice, instead of a row being maybe 30 minutes, it's 35, or there's there's just ways that you can adapt to make sure that my numbers meet, week in and week out. So, and they typically, like I said, it's not anything that I've had really too much questioning over. But that's your only way of fixing those little issues.
Yeah, fair enough. It'd be hard to sort of catch up at times, but yeah, if you're doing a couple minutes here or there, they hopefully they don't notice too much, like you said, so they
That's
can
right.
physically, mentally, they're not going, Jesus, what's he doing to us today? So
that's right. You sneak it in there. So yeah.
And what about
But
what's a day in what's a heavy day for you guys in preseason? Like how much cycling, how much bike time, how much gym time? Like what's a heavy day for them at this point? Like give the listeners an idea of what you're putting these guys through day to day at the moment.
Yeah, and look, it does vary, but I'd say the toughest days are Tuesdays.
Okay.
I call them tough Tuesdays.
Yeah.
And that's when I want to get the most out of the motorcycle, meaning the longest of the sessions. So, give you an example. Look, we start with they have their stretching, which they'll do at their house, and
Yep.
then we start with cardio, which can vary depending on the week.
Yep.
Anything from 30 to an hour initially, if there's riding on the day. Which, let's say, if we're talking about Tuesday, that's the case, and then they're out at the track riding. I do try and stick to limited time in between so that we don't make for long days, and also not to lose the track too much.
Yeah,
So
moisture-wise from a riding point. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, and also with the amount of guys that I have, I have a full-time track guy, but he needs as much time as he can possibly have to fix the track, reasonably.
Like for the next day.
So that the next day, yes.
Yeah, so he needs some daylight too.
Exactly. So, I give them a 10-minute warm-up, which that's when they're allowed, they can do whatever, they circle around thing, and that's the period when they can make adjustments with their mechanic. Mm-hmm. And then we start the schedule. And so on a Tuesday, they would start with like a longer session, and that's probably about 15 laps initially at this point. And then I don't have much of a break between, and that's still out on the track. And then they'll go into definitely some shorter stuff, but I try and make up at least, probably 20 to maybe 25 laps in that first session. And then I feel like we need to put water down anyway. They take a break, which is typically 45 minutes.
Yeah. And
then we come out and do starts. We practice starts before the bikes get too hot or, too used up.
Yeah.
And then after starts, they start their second session, which is very similar, at least another 15, or later in the stage, it'll be another 20 lapper, then a little break, and then the shorter stuff. And that either be, shorter sprint laps, 3 to 4 laps, or even shorter laps. And the way, I always have a plan, but sometimes I'll adjust depending on weather. If it's a colder day, I feel I can squeeze even more out of them. But if it's a hot day, like at the moment, it seems like it hasn't really tipped towards the cooler days.
Yeah.
Then I got to be a little bit careful, because I can read that they're right on that little rivet, where I'm not going to get the productivity that I would hope for, depending on the situation. But on average, a good 40 to 45 laps on a supercross track is about normal. And then after that, they take a break, and then we do the gym. And the gym is anything from 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, wow. There's a lot. So what's the measure that you get at the end of the day for like calories burned, or like is there another number that you're looking at to say that this was a big day? Like where's that compared to like a normal person going to the office? It's probably massively different, obviously, but.
Well, and I'm not a big thing on the whole calorie, because each guy's different on what
the whole physical makeup conversation earlier. Yeah.
Yes, because look, the Polar will tell me, and some days I'm like, oh my gosh, that seems ridiculous. But it's my way of checking how much calorie expenditure is, how much weight they've lost at the end of the gym when I weigh them.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I think, I utilize that a lot, and I check them every time at the end of the gym, because then I can get an idea too of, I know where they were, and now we're looking at, okay, where are they now? And that to me is very relative to each one individual.
Yeah, that makes it
So
more
it gives me
specific. Yeah.
instead of, well, heck, you burn up 3,000 calories. If I tell them how much they've supposedly burned, then it just gives them the mindset they can go home and eat whatever they want. And that's
Which is what you don't
definitely
want them
what
to
I do
do.
not
Yeah.
want. So I'm very careful on that whole thing.
What when you were saying too before about like on a warmer day or a cooler day you do more or less, I'm assuming there's one guy that's the weatherman and tells you specifically whether you're over that marker. Which one of them is it out of the guys? So we just last dropout hopefully, but we were probably playing havoc with the weather and stuff over there, so the signal's probably not that good. But Aldon, you were saying about like on a hot day or a cool day, you would adjust the amount of laps, for the guys depending on the scenario with the weather. I'm assuming there's one guy in your group that's probably the weatherman and is telling you specifically whether it's over or under a certain number, so that you whether you're adjusting the extra laps or not. Is there one of those guys in your group?
Actually, David, I'm that guy.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I've been doing it long enough where I know, the effects, especially in Florida, of heat, and also specifically Supercross. You don't get a lot of breathing room, and it can be really, really warm. So I am mindful, and I can kind of look at each athlete and see how much sort of you can look in their eyes and how much the strain really is, and especially regarding heat, how much they're sweating.
Yeah.
So I need to be mindful with that and try and, once again, I want to get the most productive out of a session and not just beat the guys down. There's no point in that.
Well, you still
So
need him to turn up tomorrow and do it again, don't you? So
exactly. And then, owning a facility makes you an instant weatherman. You need to be on point with what's coming, what's on radar, what's the heat index, because not only for the athletes, but also to try and, fix the track and take care of that, and how much, the water truck needs to be used to water so there's a lot that goes into, keeping us at the best possible way to get the best training out of them.
fair. You
Yeah.
definitely sound like you've become more than just a trainer these days with that whole facility now. Like there's obviously so much more to it than just you hit your heart rate numbers today and we did your number of laps today. Obviously there's so much that you've built into this by having the tracks, the staff, the buildings, the gym, all that's probably gone in, exponentially increased your workload.
No, it does. And, you got to know me. I don't know when those machines need to be serviced, what goes into these. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, it still really is cool, but I would have never thought when I first went into it that there's so many pieces of trying to make that big old ship run well. So it keeps me on my toes, that is for sure.
And despite all that, you somehow managed to find time to get involved with a new venture in the cycling world. You want to tell us a little bit about how you managed to get involved with that?
Well, David, that's been a dream for the last, 4 or 5 years now, where I thought, man, it'd be so cool. Always, bicycle's been integral in all my training and my background and everything. And I thought, man, how cool it would be to have your own like perfect bike, and I've, was blessed to be involved with Specialized for 22 years. But having my own bike was always there in the back of my mind. And actually, one of the partner that I have, his name's Alfredo. He was a guy that I kind of helped on the side, who's a top BMX pro, and he had a similar dream. He's come from Ecuador, and we were chatting years ago about, man, how cool would that be to have your own bicycle, and we spoke about it, and then he kind of went off and did a lot more research, and then when I'd meet up with him, we would chat more about it and look at the different logistics. Well, over the years, it developed to a plan to sourcing the right, companies in Asia that make the best carbon and all the process. But it started off more as a nice dream, I'd say, and sort of a homework kind of package to look into it. Well, over that time, things developed, connections were made. We've, had about 2 or 3 different prototypes that I would test on the side and look at, and then go back with ideas. But it actually comes full circle now, and we're actually going to launch this on the 15th of November. The name of the bicycle is El Carvi, and it's basically a combination of our two names, and you say it like Ferrari, El Carvi. And
nice.
it's yeah, and it's, to us, it's basically our Ferrari, so
Sounds
a
cool.
lot has gone into, we're excited, and I always think to start off a bicycle, you need to have a really good road bike, and then our goal is to venture into gravel bikes and then into the mountain e-bike.
Yeah, right. So you're going to cover the whole range eventually.
Yeah, that's the plan. And look, we're not, there's going to be limited quantities. I think we're not just diving in because they are special, and a lot has gone into them. And there'll be 3 versions that kind of we've aligned ourselves with Shimano, and they're different 3, E-tap, versions, the electric.
Shifting.
Yeah. So we kind of had to wait because Shimano on their 105, which is the lower model, they've only just put out their new electric for that. And so finally now are ready to, and I'm talking, we're going to probably only sell 50 the initial run, and then the following year, next year, the goal is 150 and so on. So it's not a lot of bikes that we want to offer, but I do believe that they are special, and we'll go from there.
Oh, it's amazing that you can find the extra time, but yeah, it sounds like you've got that full passion project going there. So that's an awesome thing, and I'm surprised that you found time for it. But yeah, it's obviously a dream. So congratulations on getting it off the ground.
No, thanks, and I'm surprised we managed to also with the time that I have. But that's been a really awesome, almost project. And then the other thing too is I want to align it with Baker's factory, because that's actually where the bike will be assembled and actually shipped out of. So it's a little bit of a collaboration, which we're excited about.
You have to build another building out there or something for fabrication or something. What's going on there? Your property's getting multi-use now.
I know. Well, I feel like I've actually got the space. But I think as things develop, yes, there will be some improvements in a couple of things. So it should work out really, really cool.
No, look, it sounds awesome. And I've seen some of the footage you've popped up on social media there of the images of the bike and that, and you on it. And it looks cool. It looks cool. So we'll have to see what it looks like when you drop more of it on the 15th.
Yeah, no, thanks, David. As I say, we're excited and looking forward to that part of it for sure.
No, awesome. And look, Aldon, appreciate the time today, mate. And obviously with the weather and stuff, and even all the dropouts still coming back around. So look, it's awesome to have you on the AlwaysMoto podcast. Your insight's been fantastic. I really appreciate diving in deep on some of those things with the program at this point in the year. And look, good luck for the rest of the couple of weeks. Hopefully the guys can put in the effort now to get the rewards later.
No, well, thanks, David. And as I say, man, I appreciate you, and keep up the good work there with AlwaysMoto. I do, check on it now. Then when you connected with me, I was able to link in and see that, and hey, keep up the great work on your end. And yeah, man, I look forward to it also at some point popping over for a visit to Australia. My family live in Australia, although they're on the western side.
Oh, fair. I didn't realize that. Okay, yeah, no, awesome. No, look, you have to get over here one day, maybe with these other events we've got going on. But look, I'm hoping to catch up with some of you guys over in the States next year at some point. So we'll have to come and put faces to the names. So yeah, definitely.
Perfect. No, we look forward to that. But thanks for everything, and as I say, keep up the good work on your end too, mate.
We'll do. Awesome. Thanks, Aldon.
All right, take care. Cheers, bye-bye.
All right, guys and girls, thanks for sticking around and listening to the AlwaysMoto podcast. I thought I'd drop in after that interview there with Aldon and all that great information that he gave us. I thought I'd drop in a little bit of an explanation around a couple of the things that he mentioned through the training side of things, and see if we could just explain it or expand on it just a little bit further, because obviously there's some information there that he might have just sort of glossed over. So I wanted to just run through a couple of things on the VO2 max bit that he mentioned, the lactate threshold that he mentioned, and his consistency ratios that he mentioned. Now, Aldon sort of touched on the fact that he doesn't like to use the VO2 max score in moto because it's not very specific. And it's completely understandable why he would come across with that, because the VO2 max is around your ability to use oxygen over the maximum oxygen your body can utilize during exercise. Now, For a cyclist who purely is just a cardio exercise, same with swimming or long distance running, it's a perfect measure and a good use of it. But in moto, where you're doing such high intensity activities, it doesn't translate as a good measure of what fitness is. So that's where he then came across with the blood lactate measures that he was talking about as well. And that's because the blood lactate is actually then, it's the point during incremental exercise that lactate builds up in your bloodstreams. And the higher that level is that you can work towards means the more intensity you can put into your training efforts, and how long you can maintain a high output before that lactate builds to or goes beyond the point that you can sustain. So he's obviously trying to then increase that lactate point to be as high as it can be so that they can perform at a maximal effort in that sort of 20-minute moto of a supercross or a 30-minute +2 in a motocross round, to be able to be under that and then repeat that. So also you're using that lactate then as a sign of recovery before they do the next thing. And that's why it's sort of done in incremental exercise blocks that they would test that. So there's, like I said, there's that VO2 max and the lactates are very different aspects of training, but they're very specific in some sports than others. And that's why Aldon has leaned towards the blood lactate. It's nice to know what your VO2 max is, but it's not critical in this sense of moto and training for moto. So that's why he goes over to more that lactate measures. And it's something that's much easier to test too, the lactates. It's a little prick on the end of the finger, kind of like if anyone listening knows anything about diabetes testing, where they prick the finger, get a little bit of drop of blood, put it on a little strip, and then measure the glucose levels in the blood. It's done similarly. You're measuring just the lactate that's in the blood. You come out with millimoles, scoring, and you can then tell how it's progressing along at different zones. Now, usually once you hit zone 3, it's gone up a lot. Zone 4, it's gone up even more. And zone 5, you're maxed out. And it sort of matches to those heart rate zones. So you're trying to move those along a bit further. And that's where he then also mentioned that each guy's heart rate zones is specific to them. So he's obviously adjusted those based on those blood lactate scores. So very interesting stuff that he's working through with his training program and utilizing all this data from his polar heart rate tracking stuff, but also he's going into blood testing. He's doing it himself, but he'd also get those done externally and get more counts done from full blood work panels, etc. So some interesting stuff. The consistency ratio is another thing that I think he's developed over time for the moto specific side of things, to judge the effort on track. So not just using the heart rate straps again for his zones and how long they were in a certain zone on the track, because as soon as if anyone's ever actually used their heart rate strap on the moto in any intense sort of 20-minute ride or something, you'll notice that in moto, your heart rate almost goes into that zone 5 straight away and stays there for pretty much the whole time. It's a little bit of the intensity. It's a little bit of just being anxious and hyped up for the moto. But it's also then all the in a race situation, you're obviously got all the action, people cutting you off, you trying to pass somebody, that jacks your heart rate up. It's not purely a cardio-based reason that your heart rate's elevated. There's other factors going into it. The adrenaline dropped into the body because you've just hit a massive jump, or somebody's cut you off and you almost crash. So the adrenaline spikes. That forces your heart rate higher. In this consistency ratio, he's talking about the time of each lap and how close they are every time they're on the track. So he's measuring every lap time and comparing it to a set lap time for that day. So they'll go out initially in that warm-up period that he talked about of 10 minutes. And then their first session, they'll get a lap time that is their best time. He's then comparing that every lap after that first time on the track to that lap time for every lap of the day, and coming out with how much variance they had across that whole day as to whether they were slacking or whether they were very much putting in a massive effort and very close to each lap time every time on the track. And that's how he's telling his moto efforts. So for everybody out there going, all right, I've improved my lap time by 5 seconds today, great. That's great in a one-lap sense. Aldon is very much focused on consistent laps over the whole moto. and repeated over each moto for, a motocross day. So Moto 1, Moto 2. He's very close. He wants everything to be exactly the same, one moto to the other. The effort is the same and the time is the same. So what you want to then take away from this, if you're thinking about how you implement this into your own training, is each lap on every day, at every time you go out to the track, you got to set something to begin with and stick to that time as close as you can across the whole day, and that will show whether your fitness is improving or not. So some basic take-home measures there for you. So something to think about when you go to the track next time. But like I said, that interview was awesome. I got a lot out of that. If anyone has any extra questions about that particular episode with Aldon there, please send us a DM on Instagram. Or send us an email through that alwaysmoto2019@gmail.com. Be happy to then try and answer those in subsequent shows, or actually put them to Aldon again on our next time we talk to him, and see if we can come around to some more information specific to those questions for you guys and girls. So please feel free to send those through to us, and we'll get those answered as best we can. So just quickly before we go, just a reminder of those things that we're talking about at the beginning of the show. The Polar Australia sale is coming up on the 21st of November through to the 28th. Check out the link in the show notes to get those, to get onto that site and get those deals available to you. Slantboard Guy has their very simple exercise equipment available that will help your training. Check out the link also available in the show notes, and use the code AlwaysMoto10 to get your 10% discount. Sorry, I think it's just AlwaysMoto. Check the show notes anyway. It's in there for that code. But it is all lowercase. I know that much for sure. Make sure that you are following us on social media to stay up to date with all things injury and moto. Search AlwaysMoto and then follow and subscribe. Make sure you, if you haven't already, if you're a new listener to this episode because it's Aldon Baker and you thought that was going to be cool, if you liked what we did, make sure you subscribe to the podcast feed so you see what comes out next. If your podcast app allows, please leave us a rating. It helps us get more listeners and helps us keep bringing you more show content. So please like or subscribe and rate us as well. Don't forget to check out our written articles over on fullnoise.com.au. Some of you will have found the show from fullnoise.com.au. And this show we have other interesting articles that we do product reviews as part of our AlwaysMoto inspections over there on that site, as well as our written versions of the emergency department before each round of the AMA Supercross. We did some for the World Supercross rounds recently, and we've got one coming up for the Oz Supercross rounds before Newcastle. We'll have some pretty cool content coming up after the Newcastle round. I'm going to be there on the ground. We're going to be trying to catch up with some of the Aussie Supercross riders and we'll do some post-race interviews and whatnot. So some good content coming your way with that series in the next few weeks. But that's it for this show. It was a massive one. Thanks for listening. Remember, you got to be smooth to be fast, because if you're not, I will probably be seeing you deep in the emergency department, maybe even the clinic, having strapping tape thrown at you wherever it sticks. Thanks for listening, guys and girls.